Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Pranav Yadav, who is CEO of Neuro-Insight. I have to mention, Pranav, you're also on the under 30 list a few years ago. Great to see you. We're talking about the perfect Super Bowl ad. Let's start by establishing why it's so hard, and maybe tell us a bit about how you come at this with Neuro-Insight.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's hard, but let's understand why advertising is hard to begin with, right? So the whole point of advertising is for creativity, which in itself is hard. Creativity is defined as using your brain to connect data sets that may not have been previously connected, to create stories, to be able to communicate messages that do one of two things. Either they reinforce brand and its attributes, or it helps you move product. So it has to do one of these two things. Either it helps you in sales or it helps build long-term equity. And the reason why that's hard is that we get lost in the multitude of channels that we have to tell these stories. We get lost in the glitz and the glamour of this industry, but the very basic need of advertising is to tell stories that do one of these two things, and we forget that.
Talk about what Neuro-Insight does, because I think it's really fascinating the way that you come at this.
Sure. So essentially, the past 5,000 years of philosophy and the past 100 years of neuroscience will tell you that 90% of human decision-making takes place in the subconscious. And by definition of the subconscious, it's below your conscious awareness. So no matter how many times I ask you questions, you yourself don't know why you make your decisions the way you do.
All fate. It's just fate.
Yes. So no, it's not just fate. It's a sum total of your subconscious associations that you are not aware of, that you store as you live your life, that come to a certain kind of conclusion when you make a decision without you actively knowing it. So think about the $1 trillion that we spend on new product innovation, marketing, advertising, and strategy every year, essentially are all relying on what we call self-reported data, which correlates into in-market behavior at about a 24% level.
So I want to stop here, because one of the things that's interesting, you're talking about a highly individualized experience, which perhaps, ChatGPT in its ilk, new day, new ads, but the Super Bowl by its very nature is, tens of millions, potentially hundreds of millions of people watching the same ad. That would suggest that it's almost doomed from the start.
Not at all. Individuals make individual decisions, but the reason why we're able to scale up decisions at a societal level is because these decision making follow patterns. We are all exposed to culture, society in a certain way, and those things end up influencing our behavior. Otherwise, it wouldn't be true that movements happen in countries, and at this point, with a highly connected world, in the world at the same time. Why is it? Is it one day that all the women woke up in the world and decided that, hey, by the way, we don't have our rights? It's a cultural phenomenon.
Right.
You create stimulus, the myths, the stories, the songs and rituals that drive individual behavior become a societal pattern. So no, the Super Bowl isn't doomed, and that's why it's magical, because 100 million people watch it. So it's an opportunity of a lifetime to create those myths, those stories, those songs and rituals for that scale of people. But to go back to why Neuro-Insight exists and what's our angle, like I said, because most of the decision making in business is relying on self-reported data, it misses out on a larger chunk of how people actually make decisions. So we invented a brain mapping technology called SST to be able to look into the subconscious drivers of motivation. And we stick electrodes on people's heads and figure out what people are likely to do, not as individuals, but at a population level, given the stimulus that they may be witnessing.
So what have you gleaned from that? Let's say I'm a marketer or somebody who's just simply interested in the field, and I'm watching the ads this weekend. What are some of the truths that you can distill in terms of the ingredients that really make something soar?
Sure. So the first thing is, I don't know where it came from, but I suspect that some guy sitting on Madison Avenue in the 60s with his feet up on the table and a rather misogynistic attitude probably said something along the lines of like, well, it's emotion that works. And I think ever since then, this entire industry has been chasing emotion. And we never really had the tools to measure it. So it was a fine thing to do, much like chasing God. But at the same time, when we got the tools
equally elusive, perhaps.
It is equally elusive. It was till we didn't have the tools, at least, to measure emotion. But we still don't have the tools to measure God. But we now have the tools to measure emotion, and we find that actually emotion is not the key ingredient to decision making. It could be a driver of decision making, but the only thing that actually is a core driver of decision making in the future, which is the point of most of advertising,
right,
is long-term memory. And unless and until something goes into your subconscious long-term memory, it is not likely to have an impact on your behavior. So now, when we look at Super Bowl advertising, a few things become clear, right? One, the scene is different from the traditional scene where you have to actually really get the buy-in from people into a story before you take them to the point or the conclusion. Here, people are ready, and they're readily watching and anticipating the ads they're going to watch. So you have their attention, and now you have to actually, and they're expecting entertainment. And now you have to create a story that, one, not just delivers on the expectation of the entertainment that they came in for, but has enough of a surprise element in it to actually delight them. Because if it meets their expectations, happiness is a simple formula. Happiness equals reality minus expectations. And if you're just meeting their expectations, you're actually not leaving them happy. So the one key thing to understand is like, how do I use creativity to not just deliver on the quotient of entertainment that they're looking for, but actually do it in a way that actually breaks the mold of what they would be expecting. So that's one.
Okay, so two, surprise factor basically is number one, if you're to sum that up.
Surprise is an important factor. Two is the setting in which you're watching it is a very different setting from your everyday setting, right? You're actually watching it with a group of people. Now, the emotions that we actually feel as sitting in a group setting and want to actually actively participate in a group setting are different from emotions that we actually want to feel when we're consuming media on an individual level. This is something that movie makers have been dealing with ever since Netflix came into the scene, right? Like the stories that are told on Netflix while people consume them on an independent basis with the media are slightly darker and inward looking. Whereas the group emotions that we like to feel with other people are things like light comedy or emotions around a societal thing. Google's Loretta was a fantastic example of how to actually tap into an emotional storyline at a group level, because we've all seen people get old. We've all seen people lose people. And we've all seen how technology can actually come in and make a difference. And it was a beautiful story told, but the entire group could understand. But if it goes darker and a more individual level, it's not going to work in that setting. And thirdly, I think we're still making Super Bowl ads like we were in the 90s or the early 2000s, where, we know it's like a one big shot we get at 100 million audience. But now, the rest of the society's moved on, and there's so many channels, and still approaching it as like a one big bang is not the way to think about it.
How should you do it differently when you say, because it is one big bang insofar as you've paid upward of $7 million for a 30-second spot. You have a celebrity, paid a lot of money. What's the alternative?
Well, think about it this way. Back in the day, brands were talking to people in a discrete, siloed fashion. It was event-based, big bang spends on like, all right, I will sponsor the Oscars. All right, I'll be present at the Grammys. Maybe I'll sponsor another tournament or two. And of course, I'll be present at the Super Bowl. And that was about it. And you maybe had a summer campaign and a winter campaign. But now you're talking to people on an ongoing basis. It's an ongoing conversation. What if you started a story in the middle of the year and people follow that narrative with the characters that you have, and you use the Super Bowl to conclude that, or you use the Super Bowl to start a story for next year? This is a way to actually give it a much longer tail, because otherwise, regardless of the quality of the creative you will produce, between the $7 million media buy and the money you'll spend on production and a celebrity and a celebrity director, you're probably going to spend between 15 and $20 million. And I don't know if that can actually give you the return on investment, unless you actually create longer tails out of it by continuing the story, which means you actually have to plan well in advance to be able to do that. And I feel like we as an industry haven't done that very well.
It's interesting. So I think the start of a relationship is actually a very good point. One thing I do want to ask you is, I know there's not a lot this year with ChatGPT, generative AI. Now Google has Bard, of course. But given the ability of these chatbots to do creative in a very individualized level, do you think that changes the opportunity going forward, potentially?
With advertising in general, or the Super Bowl?
Well, let's talk about the Super Bowl to start, because if we're having 100 million individualized experiences, it takes away from that sort of collective experience that you talked about, for example.
Exactly. So you could use ChatGPT to create a creative for the Super Bowl. And on most occasions, I'd be arguing on the other side of it, because I don't think the technology is there yet to outwit the level of creativity that we can come up with. I've seen the work. It's interesting, but nothing groundbreaking. Yet at the same time, what is disappointing is the level of creativity that we're seeing right now is not actually creative at all. It is formulaic, which means they have a formula that I have to rely on a celebrity. So no one's going out in the market without a celebrity, which, by the way, oftentimes doesn't matter at all.
Unless it's Betty White.
Sorry, what?
Unless it's Betty White for that Snickers commercial. That's my personal favorite.
Yes, exactly. Well, the celebrity can play a role, but at the end of the day, it is the depth of your human insight into the story that allows for the depth of connection with the audience.
That's excellent. So let me ask you, Pranav, do you have any top hits, ones that really resonated with you over the years that you think are examples of excellence in terms of that long-lasting impact?
There's one that I think I've watched it over 100 times, and I still cry every time I watch it, purely in terms of the creativity involved in it. It's P&G's Best Mom. And it's maybe because I love my mom a little too much, but I feel like everybody loves their mothers, and which is why it's such a remarkable creative. Have you seen it?
When I feel like I've seen so many mom ads, I'm now trying to think of that one. So no, I'm going to go back and see it. What is it that makes it so different? Obviously, there's no celebrity mom there, perhaps.
No, it actually showcases that it has multiple messages in it, but it showcases a mother and child relationship across a variety of cultures, and what a mom puts in to have a kid pick up a sport, go through their training, walk them in in dead winter, in the heat of summer, wash their clothes, put band-aids on them when they grow older, motivate them when they're down, pick them up again, be waiting when the school bus shows up. This entire journey of a mother in China, in Brazil, in America, in Canada, in different parts of the world. And then eventually all of these kids become Olympians. Eventually they show the pride on the faces of these mothers. Of course, P&G brands in the end as the proud sponsor of moms.
Yes.
A remarkable creative.
I do remember that. It is remarkable, and now that you mention it, of course, it all comes back from my subconscious. So thank you, Pranav. It's always great to talk to you, and I will be looking at the Super Bowl in a new way.
Fantastic. Lovely talking to you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.